squats, bench presses, and deadlifts, and how to use these, how to leverage these as tools for hypertrophy.
What if I told you that the specific lifts that you choose to do in the gym are irrelevant to your long-term progress?
Hey guys, welcome back to Smart Simple Fit. Today, I'm going to be doing a response to a recent video posted by Jeffrey Verity Schofield talking about doing the squat, bench, and deadlift exercises for bodybuilding. In other words, how to take the big three exercises and make them more suited for hypertrophy rather than just being specific to the sport of powerlifting. Now, in today's video, I'm going to be referring to a few people that have more experience, more knowledge, who are stronger and more jacked than I am in order to strengthen some of my arguments. If you disagree with me when I do that, go ahead and let me know in the comments below. But essentially the premise of Jeffrey's video on the big three was that you should and could manipulate the big three exercises into being variations that are better suited for hypertrophy, and that this is the best choice, right? You shouldn't just do the big three as they are done in competition, but actually you should make them more biased for particular muscles, and that this will get you better results. That's essentially the premise of his video, and the premise of my video today is that you don't need to do that, and in fact there may be several reasons why you shouldn't do that. So, in short, telling people that if they do a more insert muscle dominant exercise, right? Quad dominant, chest dominant, glute dominant. If you tell them that they do a more blank dominant exercise and say they're going to get more results if they do that is not an accurate statement. That is my video today in a nutshell. We're going to break down why that is. So, important to note, in Jeffrey's video, I've really liked some of the exercise variations he brought up. Some of the examples would be doing Romanian deadlifts in place of competition style deadlift, doing Larson press in place of competition style bench, and doing Platt style squats, Tom Platt squats, instead of just your typical high bar or low bar squats. I'd like to point out that I think all three of these exercises are really good exercises. And certainly if you do them hard and consistently, I have no doubts that you would amass a great deal of hamstring, lower back, quad, chest hypertrophy. These are great exercises. They're very sustainable. And for some people, they feel really good for their joints. So by no means would I say that the exercises he presents to the audience in his video are bad choices. It's just that they're not inherently superior to vanilla powerlifting style exercises. Now, something that is fundamental to why I disagree with Jeff's overall take in his video comes down to this, the logic of it, right? There's a logical fallacy that's called the zero-sum fallacy. Normally when people bring that up, they're talking about economics and not exercise. However, I do think it is appropriate to bring it up in today's video because it's relevant. The zero-sum fallacy is basically this. When a person gets less percentage of something total compared to more percentage, they think that there's only ever a fixed total. And so therefore, less percentage of the fixed total means I'm getting less overall. The problem with the zero-sum fallacy is that they falsely attribute the total value being fixed. So in economics, it's, oh, there's only this much money in the economy. If so-and-so has this slice of the pie, then that means everyone has to have less. And the way this manifests itself in exercise would be like if you had exercise A, where 70% of the pie in this squat variation was coming from the quads doing the work. Okay, the quads made up 70% of the pie. They were doing 70% of the work. And the load total, right, the weight on the bar plus the bar was 200 pounds. 70% would give you 140 pounds of work being done by the quads. Now, this isn't scientific or precise or anything like that, but stay with me. Exercise B. This is a variation where you're stronger, but it's less quad dominant. Let's say of that pie, only a 60% slice of the pie is dedicated to the quads doing the work. But because you're stronger on that variation, the total amount of weight being lifted is going to be higher. So let's say if it was 240 pounds 60% of 240 is 144. So what am I trying to demonstrate here? I'm not saying that B is an accurate representation of a low bar squat and A is an accurate representation of like a high bar ATG squat or something like that, although it might be similar to that in practice. But what you can see is despite the different percentage and therefore the different quad dominance between those two exercises, the total amount of work being done by the quads, in theory, was very similar. Now, again, that was a hypothetical. That's not science. That's not taken from a study or something like that. But you can understand the logic of what I'm trying to say. When you do a variation that's less dominant, there's more work being done total if you're stronger on that variation. So on a low bar squat, your hamstrings, your glutes, and lower back are able to do more work than they would be otherwise on a plat style squat, ATG high bar squat, a front squat, right? There's more work being done total. So it's not necessarily the case that there's less work going to the quads. It's that there's more work going to other places, and that is reflected in the additional strength capacity that you have on the same given day, right? Sometimes there can be a difference of hundreds of pounds between a person's front squat and a person's low bar squat, or, plat style squat and their low bar squat. It could literally be 100, or it could be more than that pounds as far as like the working set goes. It's a big, big difference. But whenever an exercise becomes more dominant towards a particular muscle, it also becomes less dominant towards other muscles. In the case of a front squat, I would say it's not the best exercise for growing your glutes. Now, front squats are a really good exercise overall. They're my favorite way of doing squats. I like them. Many people will say that front squats are pretty easy to recover from by comparison to the competition style squats, such as Brendan Teets. What Brendan is pointing out is not that front squats are superior to comp squats, but that they allow you to push more volume in a way that is somewhat specific still to comp squats compared to other machines for the legs. And that is an inherent value because you can push those legs harder without worrying about your lower back and hips as much, and perhaps even your knees, because the total weight being lifted is lighter. So from a recovery standpoint, having front squats as a secondary movement can be a really wise choice. But that doesn't mean it's the best replacement necessarily. Okay, it doesn't mean that you're going to get all the benefits of the low bar squat without the fatigue, right? There's this sort of fallacy that with stimulus to fatigue ratio, which by the way, I would agree with Natural Hypertrophy and Steve Shaw, that stimulus to fatigue ratio is a very overrated concept.
In my opinion, this is a completely misguided concept. It's something no one really needs to worry about.
The contradiction between stimulus and fatigue is so contradictory. It's because it's like talking about volume versus tonnage. Volume versus tonnage, yes, they're different things, but at the end of the day, their essence is the same.
Okay, I think for the intermediate and novice lifters, they don't need to think about this hardly at all, unless you're advanced or perhaps even elite, right? You don't need to be trying to calculate, am I getting the best stimulus to fatigue ratio in my exercises? Just do hard exercises, write them down, do them with quality reps, and get results. Okay, so if you're trying to milk out every little thing with biomechanics, you're going to end up spinning your wheels a bit. Now, that's not to say Larson press is bad, but a competition bench works just fine. It does. If you're as strong as Bald Omni-Man, I would actually agree with him. As much as it pains me to say this, I've come full circle. I agree with him now when he says something like, you should be able to bench at least 365 pounds before you even need to worry about the Larson press being an advantage. Why is the Larson press advantageous? Because it relieves your lower back and legs from intense leg drives and arching. That makes sense. It's easier to recover from because you're not doing those elements of the pressing movement, but you still get that very specific work for the chest and triceps, and it's still pushing a barbell. You could do it with a similar grip width, maybe close grip versus your wide grip, but either way, it's very similar to your bench without some of the recovery cost. That doesn't mean it's a more effective exercise. It just allows you to push yourself hard without as many recovery issues. But if you're not an advanced bencher, and maybe 365 is an arbitrary number, but you know what? I trust his judgment over mine on it. He's a lot stronger and more experienced than I am. The point is, if you're not advanced to elite at bench press, you don't need to worry about the Larson press saving you anything. Okay. That being said, it's perfectly reasonable to do a Larson press as someone who's more of a beginner or intermediate. I've done it myself. I enjoyed it. It forces you to have very clean reps. So perhaps it has additional benefits for cleaning up sloppy technique. But you can also do that with paused bench. You could just slow down. You could do some tempo work. You don't have to bench sloppy like a jerk and ego lift. You can do it properly, right? Okay, so that's the problem with the stimulus to fatigue ratio thinking. Now, again, going back to the example of front squat, because you're doing less hip flexion, right? Hip flexion would be, here's the hip joint. Okay, this is your low bar squat. Here's your high bar squat. Here's your front squat. It's very, very much reduced as far as hip flexion. So if you were trying to use front squats to get big glutes and to get some lower back work and hamstring, you're not going to be getting that. And that's going to be reflected in the fact that you're moving less pounds through space. Objectively, it's an easier exercise to recover from, but it has less total benefits and a smaller number of muscles worked than a low bar squat or a high bar squat. So you need to take that into consideration. That does not mean that front squats are a bad exercise. Again, they're my favorite way of doing squats, but you need to have a sober and accurate idea of what the trade-off consequences are of making decisions of this variation versus that variation. In order for something to be more quad dominant, it has to be less glute and hamstring dominant, right? So again, just because you're moving more pounds through space and less of a percentage of those come from the quads doesn't mean less total of those pounds are coming from the quads. And Brendan Tietz is pointing this out in some of his videos as well. So it makes sense. If you're doing the overall harder variation in terms of pushing more weight and getting more fatigue on the body, right? More stress, more fatigue. That fatigue has to come from somewhere. It doesn't just poof out of thin air. It doesn't just come into, out of the abstracted, oh no, the fatigue got me. It's hurting my results. Well, if you do low bar squats, you can get great quad results from it. In no way, shape, or form, let me make this clear, in no way, shape, or form will low bar squats or high bar squats hurt your quad hypertrophy compared to any other type of squats. Because the person who focuses on that more stressful thing, that stresses out the knees, the lower back, maybe it's the wrists and the arms on the low bar variation, depending on their setup and their build for it. Okay, that's going to stress out some tissues, sure, but the way you get around that as a power lifter is by spamming things like leg extensions and leg presses and other movements. And someone like Sam Sheathar, this is reflected in his training. Also, you look at Benjamin McIntyre. Kid looks pretty jacked and stacked to me for a power lifter. I don't see a spider physique. Why? Because he has a well-rounded program. And so just because someone is getting more fatigue doesn't mean they're getting less results. There's a problem in thinking that, oh, I'm going to minimize fatigue and maximize results. The only way you minimize fatigue is by reducing your total work and getting less results. Again, if you wanted to get all the benefits of a low bar squat in a program where you're just doing front squats or plat squats, you're going to have to isolate your lower back more and your glutes more and perhaps your hamstrings more. I'm not saying that's wrong, but the work has to come from somewhere. So if you're moving less pounds here and you're moving more pounds here and you're working more muscles here and less muscles here, in order to get the same results you would out of this one exercise, you're going to have to do more. And if this one is more stressful, but it's not reaching the full potential of your quads, well, then you can add in a little bit of isolated quad work or a bunch of it, depending on your specific needs and how your body is built for it, your rep quality, etc., your sleep. Obviously, there's little things you can do to help you recover better along the way, or a lot better, right? Better warm up, better technique, etc. But you can't escape fatigue. And I think Steve Shaw sends this point home, and so does natural hypertrophy. You get fatigued because you're doing work, and that's fine. That's not a bad thing. That's not a problem. I can understand someone doing low bar squats for years and who can squat 400 or 500 pounds and think these feel kind of disgusting. I want to switch to a lighter variation. I get it. Those weights never feel light. They might move a bit faster as you get stronger, but they never feel light. They never feel light. They're very stressful on the body. Or Bald Omni Man recently switching from bench press, I think, to more calisthenics and dumbbell bench type of thing. I get it. That probably feels better on the body. So if you switch to a more this dominant or that dominant variation or different equipment altogether, it may feel better subjectively for your joints particularly, right? Because less stress on those soft tissues. I get it. That's a valid reason, but that doesn't mean you get more hypertrophy. These choices, right, these trade-offs may aid overall in recovery. These choices may better reflect your goals. Again, if you're not a power lifter, there's less of a pressure on you to train like a power lifter, but that doesn't mean you'll get less results if you do train like a power lifter. I'm actually sick of the powerlifting slander. I'm not a power lifter, okay? But look at how people like Freaky D Train, Brendan Teets, Sam Sheethar, Benjamin McIntyre, the list could go on. These guys don't have spider physiques. Okay, so I get it. If you train just the big three and you have minimalism on everything else, or you train nothing else, you will have a garbage physique. That's true. But if you don't push yourself hard on compound movements, it will also hurt your physique. So let's not let bad examples of people who train powerlifting movements, let's not let them be representative of the whole when there's plenty of people who are powerlifters, I'm going to put some on screen, who have fantastic physiques. Most of the people who I would say have what looks like my dream physique, they're power lifters. Look how jacked and stacked these guys are. Does that look like a spider physique? And it's not fair to blame this on genetics or give credit to this just for their genetics alone and say, well, that's their genetics. No, I've seen plenty of footage of these guys doing biceps curls and rope push downs and leg extensions. That's what happens when you have a well-rounded program. There's no rules in powerlifting that suggest you're not allowed to train isolations hard to failure consistently multiple times per week, write them down, apply progressive overload, etc. Okay, you're allowed to do that. And at the same time, if you don't want to train the big three, there's so many great ways to train it. Alternatives to bench can be weighted push-ups, dumbbell bench, dips, plus some other things. Dips alone maybe is not the best one, but there's plenty of good ones. Just like with squats, there's plenty of alternatives. But I'm sympathetic to Tom Platz. Nothing compares to squats. He's so charismatic when he says that. But he's making a good point. It's a hard, challenging exercise. Yes, it comes with extra fatigue, but you know what? It's very rewarding. It's a skill. It looks cool. It's very manly. And this next one is a painful pill even for me to swallow. Doing goofy exercises like a deadlift bar, maximal stance width sumo is not necessarily less hypertrophic. Pound for pound it is, but if you do the set hard to the point of failure or to the same RPE you would on a strict set of conventional with a power bar, I have no reason to believe that goofy sumo lifts are bad for hypertrophy. They're just less efficient, pound for pound. Is that a problem? Not necessarily. I'll let you be the judge of whether that's a problem. But to say that if someone trains that way, they're not going to get results is completely inaccurate. Proximity to failure, the amount of years you've been training, whether or not you're pushing progressions and recovering, that's what determines your results. It's not the exercise selection. I really liked Alec Onkiri's recent video talking about exercise selection, how overall in the grand scheme of things, it's not that meaningful of a choice. It's closer to meaningless. I would agree with that. Now, again, I'm not a power lifter, but I will defend powerlifting against slander and power building against slander. It's not fair to say, oh, well, because this guy here has a bad physique and he skips his biceps curls and whatever, therefore the big three are the problem. No, you're the problem. And I really like Basement Bodybuilding's videos, but something that he points out is, okay, let's say you try and do the big three with stricter technique and more range of motion and so on. There's a temptation that's always there to do it in a more sloppy, garbage way to, lift your butt off the bench, bounce the bar, wider grip width. There's temptations to do it in a less sustainable way that doesn't feel as good for your body. That's more like powerlifting, but also kind of just more like cheating and ego lifting. I really strongly disagree with that take. Just because there's a temptation to do something doesn't mean you have to remove it, right? Okay, I don't think that's a valid criticism of the movement. It's a valid criticism of the person. So if someone's personal choice is, hey, I'm going to stay away from that exercise because I constantly cheat, okay, fine. But I don't think that's a good recommendation to a person's audience to just say, cut this exercise out of your program because there's temptation. Guess what? On standing strict curls for biceps, there's plenty of temptations to swing with your hips. That doesn't mean biceps curls are a suboptimal variation. The big three are perfectly reasonable ways for you to get jacked and stacked. I did enjoy parts of Jeff's video. I just felt the need to make a clear distinction. Switching to more this dominant or that dominant exercise is not going to be the difference between leveling up your gains. But if it does make a difference with how you feel and how much you enjoy your program, then that as a downstream effect will lead to more gains. But if you're training some low bar squats and you watch Basement Bodybuilding's videos or Natural Hypertrophy's videos or Jeffrey's videos and you hear them talk bad about those exercises, if you're getting results and you feel good, don't change your exercise just because someone told you to in a video, okay? Same thing with the bench press and the conventional deadlifts. If those movements are working for you and you find them fun and they feel good, keep doing them. You don't need to change them. These things will even out in the long run. Again, the people who do the hyper-specific stimulus to fatigue ratio optimal variations, they're going to have to make up for that by doing extra accessories or something else that's harder, because you can't cheat work. You can't cheat work with magic optimization. You can say that you like some exercises better than others for a variety of reasons, but you can't cheat work. Let's not demonize exercise variations. Let's not talk people out of doing things that are already working for them. Let's not pretend that the problems with powerlifting are because of the big three. Rather, the problems are because of the people who use them. Just like bodybuilding, it wouldn't be fair to say that people who go to the gym and do fluff and puff and a fluff and pump and don't write down their workouts, that's representative of bodybuilding, right? That's not fair. It's also not fair to say people with spider physiques represent powerlifting. If you haven't seen Jeff's video already, go ahead and watch it. And if you're new to his channel, I recommend you click subscribe. Jeff makes a lot of videos that I like. His sense of humor is great. He's an absolutely jacked and stacked dude, so I highly recommend his channel to you. If you guys disagree with me, feel free to make your own video response to today's video, or leave me a comment at the very least below telling me why you disagree with me. The interaction helps either way, so like, comment, share, subscribe. I appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.